Hello and welcome to The Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely, and with me today, of course, is co-founder of The Gaggle, Peter Lavelle, also host of RT's talk show, Crosstalk. Yesterday, at the United Nations Security Council, the Russian Deputy Foreign Minister, speaking on behalf of Sergei Lavrov, addressed the Israel-Palestine issue, something we haven't heard about for quite a while, certainly nothing during this presidential campaign, but it just seems like nobody in the United States seems to be paying much attention to it. The speech was brief, to the point, and raised the kind of issues that very rarely are raised in American discourse, namely that the key to any kind of a peace in the Middle East is a settlement between the Israelis and the Palestinians. And what we've been regaled with in recent weeks has been the
peace agreements,
the antics of the Trump administration, whereby they get one or another nominal Arab state to recognize the state of Israel, which they then, the Trump people and their champions at Fox News, hail as some great peace achievement. But you can only have peace between warring parties. Parties that are not in the business of war cannot really be participants in the peace process. So here we have the two main parties, Israel and the Palestinians. They don't talk. The Trump people are not doing anything to promote. But instead we have these marginal states, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, the other day Sudan. Before that we had Serbia and Kosovo signing agreements with Israel in which they recognize the state of Israel. This doesn't do anything to promote Middle East peace. And it was very heartening to hear from Vershinin that Russia still, unlike the United States, tries to maintain an even-handed policy. It's not anti-Israel, but it says key to any settlement is Israel and the Palestinians sitting down, negotiating without preconditions. Well, what's your take, Peter?
Well, it's a brilliant article, and please put it into the description, the link where everyone can read it, because it's, as you said, I mean, it's straight and to the point. There's no weasel words. There's no verbiage. There's no ideological nonsense being thrown around, which is so common. It's unbelievable. I mean, what this short speech does, it lays out what existing mechanisms there are. First of all, the Russian side promotes first of all, one-on-one is the Israelis and the Palestinians without preconditions to start the process. There is the quartet that is out there. It could be valuable if it is not just used to wish a problem away, because this is what the Trump administration has done. It's just, the Palestinian problem doesn't exist because there are no Palestinians anymore. I mean, that's exactly what they've done, and they've ignored the realities on the ground. There can be no peace in the Middle East without a settlement with the Palestinians, full stop. And this is what the Russian position has been. Also, the speech makes it very clear that Russia is not siding with any party, not siding with the Israelis or the Palestinians or any other state in the region that could be a possible player. The fact of the matter is, Russia is the only major country that has basic to good relations with all players in the Middle East, all of them. And I'm constantly criticized, asking me as if I'm the foreign minister or something like that of Russia, is, why does Russia have diplomatic relations with Israel? And the fact of the matter is, Israel exists. It exists under international law. It's there. It's a political fact. Okay? And so get over that and put your angst and energy behind a real peace process. Now, this, in a way, reading between the lines, I mean, what I got from it is that this was kind of a scoff at the Trump administration's hodgepodge patchwork I mean, they make peace with Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates. Look at what this process is all about. It's American manufacturers selling weapons. And it's another way to keep the United States in the Middle East, okay? Trump's instincts were right, but, he sees, the dollar sign and say, oh, well, it's good for business. Well, no, it's bad policy. It's bad policy, and it is not in the interest of the United States. And I would go as far as to say it isn't in the interest of any player in the Middle East, because the United States, its role in the Middle East is facilitates a process of not engaging in a constructive process. Okay, what you do is you have these captured elites, and then you have this moral hazard. Okay, well, we don't have to do anything because the Americans will take care of it. Well, it's your neighborhood, folks. It's not America's neighborhood. Okay, so I think it was really very important to remind the world, because not only is the Trump administration discredited, and we all know why. His son-in-law, Jared Kushner, is with his quote unquote what is it, the plan of the century, which is it's just nonsense. Okay, it is nonsense, and also the speech is basically telling Washington, and to some extent the Europeans, you can't take sides in this, because when you take a side, you don't allow the process its natural course.
Right. No, I think it's very important. And it's very important that Russia has throughout maintained a very consistent position, which is we have to adhere to the specific United Nations resolutions on the There was a resolution 242, resolution 338, and therefore we can't just do an end run and just ignore all these things. That's what, and there has to be an approach to the Middle East which takes in recognition of the fact that there are United Nations resolutions on the book which state quite clearly no settlements on occupied land, which is obviously a violation of the Geneva Conventions, no unilateral steps to alter the situation. It has to be a negotiated outcome. And the Russians have been very consistent. So Russia has recognized West Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, but it went together with saying that East Jerusalem will be the capital of a future Palestinian state. Unlike what the United States did, who just simply accepted the whole of undivided Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, which clearly flies in the face of all of the United Nations. We're going right back to 1948, just simply declaring Jerusalem to be Israel's capital. And when you think of this ridiculous Kushner plan, first of all, just the idea of throwing money at the Palestinians, thinking they're going to buy into it. First of all, no one really believes that any of this money will materialize. But if the Palestinians haven't given up after more than 70 years, they're not going to just take the few billions that Trump is offering them and just run and say, oh, that we're happy with that. So, as you say, this Kushner plan is a joke. And now Trump is pretending that, oh, well, we've got this really great thing. And essentially what he's doing is presenting the Palestinians with a fait accompli. Hey, look, guys, you don't have anyone. You don't have any friends. You don't have any hope. You better come round and do as we say. It's not going to work. Hasn't worked for 70 years. No reason to believe it's going to work now.
What it does is that this patchwork of recognitions, these are elites making these decisions. It's not public opinion. If you go deep down into public opinion, it's very, very different. Again, this is elite capture. Okay, they're getting something for it. Okay, I'll say what it exactly is. It's a bribe. Okay, that's what it is. Okay, and maybe threats thrown into it as well. Okay, that unfortunately is the way American foreign policy works a great deal of the time. One of the things that I find really interesting, and I want to do a separate video with you on this, is that we constantly hear out of Western capitals, particularly very much out of London too, in vogue with Washington, is about international norms. Okay, and values in foreign policy. And this drives the Russians and I suppose the Chinese and a lot of other people nuts, because, I mean, what do you mean values? Okay, we have something called international law, and you used to support it. Okay, that's what will, you can keep your norms, you can keep your values, But let's talk about what's written down that you signed up to, we signed up to, and everybody else signed up to. It's called the law. And why don't we work through that? Because then there's no misunderstanding and there's no politicking about it, okay? And you know what? It deflates ideology as well. What a wonderful world it would be, okay? What was John Brennan said, if Biden was in the White House and Navalny was president of Russia, he was using John Lennon's Imagine song. Well, just imagine if the United States and its allies observed international law. What a wonderful world it would be. And this is something that the Russians harp on all of the time, because it's the only way you can do it. It's not picking winners, it's adhering to law.
That's exactly right. And that's why they pick on that expression, the rules-based international order. And they say, yeah, it used to be known as international law, but it's very striking. You don't use that term, international law. You use this phrase that sounds like it's international law, but clearly isn't. It means we set the rules and we adhere to this international order by the rules that we have just set. And of course, there's are complete violations of international law. International law has been very explicit on the question of Israel and the Palestinians for a very good reason, because Israel is a creation of the United Nations. Yes. So therefore, the United Nations has to have a very big say in the settlement of the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. The Americans and, of course, the Israelis pretend that this isn't so, but it is so. It was, there were specific conditions that had to be fulfilled before Israel was allowed to join the United Nations, and there have been endless, innumerable resolutions about all the issues that have to be resolved. The refugees, the question of Jerusalem, the holy sites, and then, of course, since '67, the occupied land. America has again just sort of largely pretended that this wasn't the case, and all it required is that America is Israel's best friend, or Israel is America's best friend, or whatever. But the fact is that America has just simply blithely ignored international law.
Yes, and the way to the best way forward is the United States to step away from its its heavy-handed involvement in this conflict. I mean, if the this is a pipe dream, obviously, because every single politician just, shakes in their boots because they're terrified of the lobby. But, if the United States took itself out of the mix, Israel would have no choice but to make a real peace with its neighbors, okay? And I want to stress, and you just said it too, because I want to cut through all the nonsense that people bring up when we talk about the Israel-Palestine conflict. Israel exists. It exists under international law, okay? It's not, should Israel exist or Israel shouldn't exist? It's nonsense. It does exist, and it exists in a body of law that is codified, all right? And people understand how it works, okay? It's just the major power players that won't allow it to work. And this would be to Israel's benefit and security if it would do it, okay? It's unfortunately, they don't have that mindset. See, the U.S. has a neoliberal outlook, not only domestically but internationally, but the Israelis have a Zionist ideology that dictates how they behave. Okay, these two things are an impediment to bringing peace to the region, and I hate to say it, but even if there's a Biden administration, the U.S. policy isn't going to change. Some things just never change, and that's a real pity, because we've decade after decade after decade, we've lost opportunities here, and it's because of the moral hazard that the U.S. and its allies create for Israel. And there will be a reckoning one day. This problem isn't going to go away, and let's go full circle to what was said in the United Nations, is that you can't resolve this region's problems without addressing the core issue. And once you do that, other things will fall into place.
Yes, that's exactly right. And what Trump has done is just made explicit what previous administrations had been doing, which is a very one-sided policy, while pretending to be an honest broker. Trump doesn't even bother to pretend to be an honest broker. I mean, he's the dishonest broker. And so, his idea is, and he did the same thing with Iran, which is, put the squeeze on and just make life so miserable for you that you will be forced to come to the negotiating table. Well, it hasn't worked in the case of Iran. It's not going to work in the case of the Palestinians. they're not people who give up. I mean, if there were people who give up, they would have given up long ago. They haven't done so, so they're going to be still there. And Trump's policy is doomed to failure. Even if Netanyahu goes ahead and annexes the Jordan Valley, as he's threatened to do, it still, that problem isn't going to go away.
Yeah, I mean, you can't wish it away. You can't, with a pen stroke, change the political realities on the ground. All right, and what'll happen is if Netanyahu does that, he either has to recognize that Palestinians live there and because essentially you created a one-state solution. So if you have a one-state solution, you're going to have over 20% of your population that is disenfranchised completely and not under the Israeli law. Well, that's worse than apartheid. At least in South Africa, there was a division. Okay, obviously it wasn't fair, it wasn't equitable, but there was categories in South Africa. What are they going to do in Israel? Okay, it is an untenable situation, because what are you going to do? Commit ethnic cleansing? I mean, what? I mean, they're creating a dilemma for themselves.
Right. No, exactly, because you're getting the continuing growth of a population, and they have no means of solving them. You can't just throw them out. And nor are they prepared to grant joint citizenship. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It's just they're creating endless problems for themselves down the road. And presumably, again, they continue with this policy. Well, let's just make life as miserable for them as possible, and they'll just simply go away. Well, they haven't gone away. Look at Gaza. They haven't left Gaza. I mean, it's been under a blockade for I don't know how many years. Still, they haven't gone away.
Yeah, what's it going to take to get a major sea change in this here? I mean, we hear from Western politicians about the value of human life and the dignity of human life and the arc of history and all of that. It's all nonsense. It's all a lie. If you turn your back on the Palestinians, it's all a lie. Okay, and that's the easiest example to bring up. What pains me so much, George, is that if someone in the United States with some level of education, let's say a first year at university or college, if they accidentally came across our podcast, they wouldn't have an idea what we're talking about at all.
No.
They wouldn't understand anything, because if Americans only knew what their government is doing in their name, I look at evangelical Christians, which still remains the backbone of Israeli support in the United States. All I can say to evangelicals, if you read the gospel and you look at the facts on the ground, the side you should support is obvious.
Right.
Obvious.
But it's very interesting what you say, because when you watch any news show on cable, and there is, the few times that they ever cover the Israel-Palestine issue, they invariably bring on spokesmen for the Israeli government, whom they take to be neutral, dispassionate, disinterested observers. Well, let's not talk to this representative of the Israeli government. Oh, Palestinians, terrorists, they're rejecting every peace agreement that's ever been we've put forward. Yes. It never occurs to them, hey, how about doing the same thing and let's have a representative of the Palestinians? No, they just take the Israeli spokesman as being objective observers. And go on.
I think, what's the woman's name that is one of she's been a very long time negotiator for the Palestinians with the Israelis.
Oh,
I can see her face. She's a rather.
I know.
But I think she was on 60.
I've forgotten her name. Yeah.
I think she was on like 60 Minutes 20 years ago or something like that.
Yeah. Exactly. 20 years.
But the reason why I'm saying that is that I can't think of the last time I saw someone backing the Palestinians on cable TV. I don't think ever.
No.
Ever.
No.
I mean, I was.
Has been decades, right.
I think it was with. Don't hold me to it. I think it was the news outlet, the Jacobin. They had a Zoom call, and I think it was about foreign policy. Maybe it was about Palestine, Israel. But the Palestinian representative, Zoom locked that person out. They locked the person out.
Right.
Well,
Facebook has done,
see,
yeah, Facebook has done this with Palestinian accounts. I mean, it's done an awful lot of that, locking out Palestinian accounts. So yeah, absolutely.
To people that, I think George and I have been very, very dispassionate here, but I would like to leave everyone watching this video with the thought, is that Israel demands the protections of international law as a member of the United Nations. Can the Palestinians ask for exactly the same and no more?
Right.
I think that's fair.
That's right.
That's what needs to happen.
That's right. That's right. And as far as I remember, under the Jared Kushner plan, Palestinians would be denied any kind of representation at the United Nations or join any international organizations without Israeli approval. So that's what's in store for them. But it's interesting, just going back to on the Biden, that Biden enjoys the support of some of the most fanatical neoconservatives. So remember, for the fanatical neoconservatives, Trump hasn't done apparently enough for Israel. I mean, Bill Kristol is campaigning for Biden. Abe Foxman is campaigning for Biden. So these are the most fervent Zionists in American public life, and for them, Trump is they consider Trump an unreliable friend of Israel.
It's I don't remember the gentleman's name. He's been on Crosstalk a number of times, but he represents a Zionist organization. Zionist is in the official name. The American Zionist Organization, something to that effect. And this is when Barack Obama was president, and the money kept flowing. Okay, fine. Obama and Netanyahu didn't have a good rapport. Who cares? Okay, who cares? But the money kept flowing, and there was no objections about settlement growth in the West Bank. The U.S. was mute on that. And so this guest said, and Obama's throwing Israel under the bus. And I said, every president, according to you guys, throws Israel under the bus. I mean, what is it going to take? Okay, but I mean, that's one of the. It's like F1 on your computer. The administration is throwing Israel under the bus. I mean, or remember when Hillary Clinton said, Hillary Clinton said is that, if I become president, well, I will take U.S.-Israeli relations to the next level. What level could that possibly be?
You're absolutely right, because people forget. I mean, they remember that they thought Jimmy Carter was throwing Israel under the bus, but they accused Ronald Reagan of throwing Israel under the bus, because you remember when Ronald Reagan came up with his peace plan, I think his September peace plan, the Zionist lobby was absolutely beside itself. And that peace plan was very mild. I mean, it was still basically Jordan and Palestine, not an independent Palestinian state. It was a Jordan cum Palestine. But that was enough to just, for the Zionist lobby just to rage at Ronald Reagan.
I think it was the first time since the existence of Israel. I mean, you have to remember LBJ let the Israelis destroy, attack the USS Liberty, and he didn't say anything about it. Okay, all right. He didn't want to get involved in it because the election was coming up. But it was under Bush, Bush Senior, it was Secretary of State Baker, and it was probably the most firm thing the Americans have ever said to the Israelis is that if you want to talk to us, here's the State Department number, and he just, it's just into the, the switchboard there, okay, and they caved eventually, and this is very unfortunate. When there's so much going on in the United States and there's so many people in need, I really wish foreign aid would come up as a campaign issue. How much money would be saved? I say cut all of it, okay, and start over from scratch and go it on a one-to-one basis, okay, not in principle if it's necessary, and it furthers American interest and it furthers peace and diplomacy, okay. What's doing now, it's just basically international banditry, it's bribery, treachery, and threats, okay, and it should come to an end. The American taxpayer gets nothing out of it, nothing. Right. They don't have any idea where it's being spent.
You kind of wonder how much did America pay in bribes to get these recognitions from Sudan, and I'm sure they're still doing it now. I mean, I wonder how much some other of the Gulf states, Qatar, how much are they offering to bribe Qatar for maybe on the eve of the election? Yes, we do recognize Israel.
Let me say this delicately, okay, because I don't want to be accused of anything. But, considering how those, because they're not really states. I mean, they're families, they're clans, okay? And, kind of a nod and a wink, we can help you get money over this way and this way. We can help, okay? Yeah, all right, okay. Again, it's making the problem worse. Instead of encouraging these regimes, why don't you ask them to reform? I mean, you're telling everybody else to do it, but you won't tell these people to do it. How about stop beheading people? Can we start there? Okay. I mean, you care so much about your religion, but you never let a Christian worship in your country? Huh? Really? I mean, it's not shared values. It's not shared values. I don't share any of those values whatsoever. Okay. Yeah. And stop shoving it down everyone's throat. Okay. Have a recognition. Okay. If these politicians would say it's just geopolitics, I scratch their back, they scratch mine, I would believe that and probably accept it more than all the nonsense rubbish that they keep spewing out about values and the international order and norms and all that. It's all gobbledygook word salad. Okay, and they're lying to you. That's
right. And it's very interesting because when Trump does his stump speech, he goes through this litany. I mean, he does this 3 times a day now. It's the litany. We killed Baghdadi, we killed Soleimani, we walked out of the JCPOA, we're squeezing Iran like hell, and these countries now have recognized Israel, and Serbia and Kosovo, they have this relation with Israel. And then you think, that's wonderful for Israel. What does it do for the United States? I mean, so he goes through this litany as if somehow this is great, and we recognize Jerusalem as the historic capital of Israel. Okay, wonderful for Israel, and for America, what is it?
Well, it also tells you something about the conditioning, how people are conditioned in the body politic. I mean, I don't, with all due respect to the voters, I don't want to be calling people deplorables or anything like that, or chumps, as Biden likes to say now. But I mean, the American public doesn't understand, isn't given, as we've just said a few minutes ago, they aren't given a balanced view of what's going on with that conflict, the Palestinians and the Israelis, and about Iran. I mean, you know as well as I do. I mean, we were just conditioned to hate Iran because of the hostage crisis. Okay, America never got over that. Okay, never got over it. And we were just brought up that way. I mean, how many people give Iran's side of the story in American media? Okay, I mean. Not on cable, that's for sure. Okay,
that's right. But it's again, if you think about, what has it done for America? 1979, 1980, Iran was virtually isolated in the world. Bad relations with the United States, bad relations with Europe, bad relations with the Soviet bloc. It had very bad relations with the Soviet Union
and Iraq.
Iran now has friends everywhere. So it's an amazing transformation whereby Iran has been the one that's been diplomatically successful, and the United States is the one that's isolated. The United States is now no longer in a kind of international mainstream on the policy toward Iran. That's a huge. That means the U.S. leaders are not pursuing the U.S. national interest.
Well, with the assassination of Soleimani, a lot of people got really upset with me. And I just said, the U.S. assassinated illegally under international law, by the way, the single most important person that was actually fighting terrorism in that region. Exactly. He was the biggest terrorists feared him more than anyone else. Okay, and the American public can't even get their head around that. Okay. This person was revered in Iran, and Al Qaeda reviled him. So let's think about how this is like an LSAT question, okay? If Al Qaeda reviles a certain person, and as an American, how should you probably feel about the person that Al Qaeda reviles? Right. But no. That would be just too simple, but it is that simple.
course it is. Of course it is. He was devastating to Al Qaeda. That it drove them out of most of Iran. I mean, most of Syria. Yeah, absolutely.
And Iraq.
Iraq. That's exactly right. And that's why he's never explained to these, his cheering mobs. Trump has never explained to them, what did America get out of killing Soleimani? I mean, it's just they're just supposed to cheer. Oh, he's a bad guy.
It's not only zero; it's negative.
Exactly.
Okay, it's negative.
Negative. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Peter.
We covered a lot of ground there.
Covered a lot of ground, but it's very sad that foreign policy is not discussed in the presidential election, because sadly there's pretty much a consensus between the two parties on most issues. And on Israel, there really is very little daylight between the two parties.
I just got a message on Facebook complimenting the gaggle. They enjoy the gaggle with their first cup of coffee in the morning. So on behalf of George and myself, I thank you and appreciate it.
Excellent. That's wonderful to hear. All right. So remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.